Welcome to this explainer. I am so incredibly excited to have you here today because we're about to explore an epic, century-long African empire that literally dismantles everything we thought we knew about global history. We're talking about the Sokoto Caliphate. This was a massive, highly organized state that popped up in West Africa right at the dawn of the 19th century. It's a civilization packed with military brilliance, radical educational reforms, and some seriously profound poetry. So get ready, because what we're going to cover today fundamentally challenges those traditional, usually very Eurocentric views of pre-colonial Africa. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. 1. Beyond Eurocentric history. 2. The 1804 Fulani Jihad. 3. Building the Sokoto Caliphate. 4. Nana Asma'u's educational revolution. 5. The 1903 British conquest. And finally, 6. A lasting intellectual legacy. We're covering the whole life cycle here, from military struggle to revolutionary poetry, right up to a tragic colonial collision.
Section 1. Beyond Eurocentric history.
To really get the Sokoto Caliphate, we first have to tackle a huge historical blind spot. You know, for way too long, the lens we've used to look at pre-colonial Africa has been just incredibly narrow and, frankly, totally inadequate. I want you to ask yourself this direct question. Did pre-colonial African societies lack sophisticated political systems? It's an assumption that's been quietly baked into a lot of history books, kind of painting this picture of a continent just waiting around for outside intervention to bring order. But does the actual evidence back that up? No way.
Take a look at this quote from recent research. The Eurocentric perspective overlooks the African contribution to political philosophy, maintaining the misconception that African societies lacked a sophisticated political system, especially before colonial intervention. The reality? 18th and 19th century West African statesmen, guys like Usman and Fodio, were producing some deeply sophisticated political and philosophical thought. These weren't just theories floating around, they were the actual blueprints for massive, functioning governments. They proved that old assumption completely wrong.
Section 2. The 1804 Fulani Jihad. So, how did this sophisticated state actually get off the ground? Well, set the scene with me. It's the late 1700s in the Hausa kingdom of Gobir. You've got heavy taxation, religious syncretism, and the marginalization of Fulani pastoralists. Basically, it's a powder keg of economic grievances and a massive desire for religious reform. Throughout the 1790s, an Islamic scholar named Usman and Fodio gains a ton of influence, which totally terrifies the Gobir elite. By February 1804, facing intense persecution and a direct ultimatum from the ruler, Sarkin Yunfa, Usman and Fodio and his followers pull off a hijra. This was a strategic migration to Gudu to escape. And this wasn't just them running away, it was the birth of a unified movement. Fast forward to June 1804, and this tension explodes in a desperate fight for survival at the Battle of Tabkin Kwatto. Now, what's really interesting about this comparison is the sheer, unbelievable asymmetry of this impending battle. On one side, you have the Gobir military machine. We're talking thousands of troops, heavy cavalry wrapped in quilted armor, packing muskets. On the flip side, the Fulani forces. They are vastly outnumbered, mostly just lightly armed archers on foot, and they have, get this, a grand total of about 25 horses. Just 25. On paper, this shouldn't have even been a contest. Yet, the tactical brilliance of the Fulani forces completely flipped the script. They pulled off a surprise night march to the lake of Tabkin Kwatto. So, when that heavy Gobir cavalry charged the very next day, the Fulani didn't break. They formed this tight defensive square, and their highly agile archers just unleashed sustained, disciplined volleys. This continuous rain of arrows absolutely broke the momentum of the cavalry charges. The Fulani routed this massive army, capturing vital supplies, and even taking Sarkin Yunfa's personal sword as war booty, which they handed over to their commander, Alio Jado. Talk about a real game changer. Section 3. Building the Sokoto Caliphate. And this brilliantly illustrates what happened next. That unlikely victory paved the way for a massive, centralized state. Look at this vast expanse. The Sokoto Caliphate stretched way across West Africa, essentially absorbing and unifying all these former, often warring Hausa kingdoms into a single, cohesive political entity under Islamic law. It was an absolute administrative marvel for its time. The rapid transformation of society was stark. Look at the structures before and after the jihad. Before, you had corrupt Hausa kingships. After, a centralized government with emirs ruling provinces right under the caliph in Sokoto. Those old, oppressive, arbitrary taxes, gone.
replaced by institutionalized charity and land taxes, zakat and kharaj. And instead of constant interstate warfare, the region saw rapid political stabilization. This sparked a massive agricultural and trade boom, turning cities like Kano into these absolutely thriving economic hubs.
Section 4. Nana Asma'u's Educational Revolution.
But hey, a state is way more than just its borders and taxes, right? Let's shift our focus from the battlefield to the classroom and dive into the golden age of the empire's intellectual achievements. Meet Nana Asma'u, Usman Fodio's daughter. She was a prolific scholar, a poet, and just a formidable leader who lived from 1793 to 1864. To give you an idea of her absolute genius, there's this amazing anecdote where her father was testing her on Tamajek, the language of the nomadic Tuareg. She stumbled a bit and actually confessed she hadn't taken formal lessons. She brilliantly picked up the language simply by eavesdropping on conversations. She ultimately mastered multiple languages, including Arabic, Fulfulde, and Hausa. Her brilliance didn't happen in a vacuum. It was heavily supported by her father's deeply progressive stance. Uthman Fodio offered this fierce defense of women's education. He explicitly called out men who refused to teach women, saying, "O Muslim women, do not listen to the misguided ones. They treat their wives, daughters, and slaves like household implements, which are used until they are broken and then thrown onto the rubbish heap." Nana Asma'u's incredible access to scholarship was built directly on this foundation of radical reform.
Taking this mandate to heart, Nana Asma'u created something truly revolutionary: the Yan Taru. Started in 1840, this was an organization of itinerant women teachers. These teachers, known as Jaji, wore a very distinctive malfa hijab as a mark of their education. They traveled around teaching the Quran and poetry to the female masses. Crucially, they taught women in the privacy of their own homes. This was such a brilliant workaround to successfully circumvent conservative critics who were entirely opposed to women gathering in public spaces.
Written in the beautiful Ajami script, which is essentially writing local languages using Arabic letters, this is the actual first page of Nana Asma'u's poem, Warning for the Negligent. She purposefully translated complex theological works into Hausa and Fulfulde so everyday people could easily grasp them. And she used poetry because its hypnotic musicality, the rhythm, and the rhyme made it incredibly easy to memorize and pass down in a culture that deeply valued oral tradition. Section 5. The 1903 British Conquest. Let's move to and see how this builds into the next, much darker phase of our story. Now we have to look at the tragic collision between this highly scholarly world and the unstoppable machinery of British imperialism. Throughout the late 19th century, the British, mostly under Frederick Lugard, began a very rapid encroachment. Check out the sequence. The Royal Niger Company occupied Bida in January 1897. By January 1900, the British formally formed the Northern Nigeria Protectorate, just totally disregarding Sokoto's sovereignty. Emirate after emirate fell, leading the British directly to the doorstep of Sokoto itself in March 1903. The final battle is a stark, almost painful contrast. You have the British West African Frontier Force, 656 rank-and-file soldiers, but heavily equipped with the devastating, mechanized technology of the industrial age. Against them stood the Sokoto defenders under Caliph Muhammadu Atarhu I, who chose to fight rather than just submit. He fielded 4,000 infantry and 2,000 traditional cavalry, armed largely with spears, arrows, and outdated firearms. And this is the number that decided the fate of the Caliphate. 4. That is the exact number of British Maxim machine guns on the battlefield that day. To put that into perspective, within just 20 minutes of engagement, those 4 guns completely decimated the Sokoto cavalry and infantry charges. The defenders fought incredibly bravely around their flag, but the mechanized reality of the British Empire was just too much. In less than 2 hours, a century-old empire was ended by colonial force. Section 6. A Lasting Intellectual Legacy. So, the crucial point is this: an empire is way more than its final military defeat. As we step back from 1903, we realize that while the political borders of the state were erased by the British, the intellectual and cultural framework completely endured. Those beautiful Fulfulde poems written by scholars like Nana Asma'u, they are still recited in West Africa today. The Yan Taru educational network survived colonial rule and is still out there empowering women. And most importantly, the Caliphate left behind a proven, undeniable record of highly sophisticated pre-colonial governance. I want to leave you with these evocative words from Nana Asma'u herself. From her work, A Plea to Saintly Women, she wrote, "May we be reunited with those who have passed on. Consider this an affirmation of your potential should you have the aspiration to achieve lofty stations." Her words literally stretch across the centuries, speaking directly to us today about human potential, the pursuit of knowledge, and pure resilience.
Which leaves us with a final thought I really want you to carry with you. If a civilization this complex, this highly structured, and this intellectually vibrant was thriving in West Africa way before colonial rule, what else about global history are we just waiting to relearn? Thank you for exploring this with me today. And for sure, keep asking the big questions.